All right, gang. We have about 100 of us here or so. I just wanted to obviously extend our best to everybody who finds themselves sort of holed up in their respective homes around the country. What I want to do tonight is I want to go over a sort of a set of facts that identify where we are right now. You know what exactly our position is on all of this stuff and what it is that we can all do about this. They began with the concept of sheltering in place, which was basically a state of emergency concept developed for hurricanes and tornadoes. That had been invoked by the governors now of California and New York and Connecticut and Illinois, ordering people to be remain in our homes, subject to actual misdemeanor penalties if you're caught going out without having a justified reason for being out, such as to purchase necessary food or medical supplies. But to give some idea of how difficult it is to control these things, that they actually have a person now in the staff of Vice President Mike Pence, who's supposed to be in charge of the federal coordination of the response to this epidemic. Someone in his staff has now been tested positive with the virus, in the process of quarantining that person now. The world airlines have cut over 40% of all of their flights because people have basically stopped flying because the air is circulated inside a plane, and so people don't want to be on the planes. Because all it takes is one person basically on the plane, and if the virus circulates through the system, it could infect everyone. The hospitals are filling up all across the country. In fact, all across the world. The hospitals in Italy are now filled to overflowing. They're having to make decisions as to who's going to be hospitalized. The schools are closing. They're now discussing closing the schools all the way to the end of this school year in June. Our course that we teach each spring at UC Santa Cruz has now been canceled. Now we'll have to try to figure out how to present that course over the internet, probably. We're working on that there at our office now to figure out how we're going to be doing this. But since a lot of us will be ordered to remain in our homes throughout this period, this will give us sort of a captive audience for our course for the year. But a lot more people will be able to get to attend than can normally be fit into one single classroom at UC Santa Cruz. Now, there are certain. Let's try to get clear now. One of the things that the Christic Institute and the Romero Institute has been able to do for our supporters and the people across the country is to try to sort through a lot of the rumors and ascertain what the facts are underlying various events, whether it's the Watergate burglary or the Iran-Contra scandal or the issues of nuclear power plants or the state of affairs with regard to global climate change. So what we want to do here at the beginning of our time together today is just go over some of the basic facts and separate them out from the rumors that have been flying around on this. It is true that this virus began in China. That does not, of course, justify Donald Trump constantly referring to it as the China virus. There's no doubt that he is attempting to kind of stir the flames of xenophobia on the part of the United States and try to blame it on China, to say nothing about the racial overtones of that. There are a number of Chinese people across the country that have already been subjected to harassment because of Trump's constant reference to this as the China virus. But the fact is, it did start there, and it is in fact true that China did delay for almost a full month, putting notice out to the rest of the world that there was, in fact, an epidemic underway in China. But they as soon as they realized that this was threatening to spread outside of their country, they notified the rest of the world. And very importantly, they adopted an aggressive campaign to have people stay in their homes. They actually deployed military to make sure that people stayed in their homes to stop the spread of this. And it appears that China now is on the downside of the slope of this particular epidemic. This policy of staying in your home and staying out of public, staying away from groups of people that may contain a person who's carrying this virus, has proved to be extraordinarily important. So while perhaps 10% of the blame for the virus might be placed on China's failure, indeed refusal, to have notified the rest of the world about this in the first month that it was spreading, they're probably entitled to probably 50% of all the positive benefits that could come to this by letting everybody know what it is we can do to stop this thing. They have been able to demonstrate by the dramatic and rapid action that they took to keep everybody home and out of public places, that this is the primary way to stop the spread of this particular virus. And they've been very clear, also from China, the need to just wash people's hands. You hear this every day now. Wash your hands every couple hours. And if you go out anywhere outside of your house, in handling doorknobs and handles on things, wash your hands. In China needs to be given the credit for having come to realize that this is an important way to combat the spread of this virus, and they've been very clear about that. So they're entitled to that credit. Now, there are right now, and it's also important to point out that Donald Trump, among the many shortcomings that he does have, and that we've all been very much aware of for the last 3 years, it is true that he, for 2 full months after having been notified by the officials in China and been notified by all of our intelligence agencies that this was in fact a pandemic that was on its way to the United States and that drastic steps needed to be taken, for 2 full months, Donald Trump flat out denied that this was a pandemic. Insisted that this was nothing more than just a slight variety of the flu, and went so far as to declare it to be a hoax perpetrated by the Democratic Party to try to undermine his election, so that he was not only delaying in getting started on what it is that needed to be done, but he was actively denying the very reality that underlay this. He went so far as to assert that there were only 15 cases in the entire United States, and that it was just going to disappear like a miracle, and would be basically passed through the country and be done by the end of April. And he knew that all of this was not true. He had been inundated with his intelligence departments and being told about this and being warned aggressively by the officials in China to prepare for this, but absolutely refused to do so. So that he is probably entitled to probably 50% of the blame for the degree of the spread of this in the United States. We could have started 8 weeks earlier to try to get people to stay home and to stop gathering in groups and doing the things that are causing the spread of this particular virus. So that, but blaming people is not the point of everything. The key is to try to all work together cooperatively. You've heard that 100 times by now, but we need to know that what we're concerned about is here in the United States, that given this failure to have moved on this virus when we first knew about it, that it's anticipated that the way this thing developed in Italy may well be what's getting ready to happen here in the United States. In that Italy just today had 650 people died in Italy. Their hospitals are completely overwhelmed. Their health care staff are coming down with the disease throughout the country. The Vatican is shut down now. They're in, and there's tons of rumors flying everywhere on the internet now. People are seizing upon this particular unfortunate set of events that are taking place to try to promulgate their previously existing theories about the world. Whether it's Trump trying to blame China for it, whether it's Trump and the Republicans trying to justify shutting down the border to Mexico, which they've been trying to do for one reason or another for the last 3 years. But we in turning our focus on the United States itself, our particular country here, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are now unemployed and are actively being laid off, actually, by their companies, so that the companies can avoid having to pay them now. And so what's going on right now, as we look around, is the stock market, as we know, has lost almost 10,000 points. Now, it's important to point out that during the 3 years of the Trump administration, there has been a gross inflation of the stock market. There have been tons of activities going on the part of corporations that are artificially jacking up the value of their stock. There's reckless speculation going on in the stock market. And so there's been this absolutely artificial inflation of the value of the stock market. And as we know, Donald Trump has been constantly pointing to the stock market as a demonstration of his success. The Trump administration is very clearly, has been for some time, trying to figure out how to take advantage of this particular situation that we're in to bolster Trump's chances of winning the election. He's now started trying to characterize himself as a wartime president. You know, the classic paradigm of a candidate that's in office trying to maintain his position in office by getting to be a wartime president, thinking that he can be engaged in a war and they'll have to keep him in order to maintain the war. And at the same time, the Democrats, it's quite clear, the Democrats as a collective party have descended upon him like a pack of wolves here. They're just attacking him. The Democrats have, the CNN has, the MSNBC, the New York Times, and they're just virtually every single coverage of this thing starts out with them re-emphasizing his responsibility for the long delay in this thing. And so that it's unfortunate that inclination on the part of a two-party system has had this kind of a response to what it is that's going on here. But this is now manifesting itself. It's manifesting itself in a conflict between the Republican and Democratic Party as to how they're going to respond to the epidemic. But fortunately, both parties have really astonishingly come to an agreement that they need to send out literally billions of dollars, perhaps trillions of dollars, out into the American public to pay people because they're being ordered to stay home, to stay off the streets and stay out of contact with other people, and they can't go to work, and therefore the economy is suffering from this. And so they've made a collective decision, the Republican and Democratic Party together, to dispense hundreds of billions of dollars out into the people. Now, what's going on is this interesting dynamic between the Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans keep on insisting upon sending this money to the corporations and to the companies. They're saying, "Oh, we have to save these major corporations. including, which will become important here in our discussion later, including the fossil fuel corporations, the oil corporations, that we've got to send billions of dollars of tax money to the oil corporations to keep them in business, because the value of the oil has gone down to about $20 a barrel from its position of around $45 a barrel. And so that they're desperately in need of trying to stay alive. And so they're demanding, all the big lobbyists for the fossil fuel corporations are descending on Washington, demanding that they be given billions of dollars as a bailout. So the Republican Party is focusing on sending billions of dollars to the corporations and then having them make a decision what they're going to do with the money. What we discovered, of course, back in 2008 during the major recession at that time is that the $800 billion bailout that was given to all the major corporations, they used it largely to buy out their competitors, to give huge executive bonuses, to allow their shareholders to purchase more stock in their companies, to give them greater control over their companies. And so the Democrats have responded to that proposal on the part of the White House in the Republican-controlled Senate by insisting that not be allowed to happen this time. And the Democrats are insisting that the better way of doing this is to have money sent directly to people who are out of jobs and out of work and aren't able to go out to do their normal living. And that's the fact that both political parties agree that something like that ought to be done is extraordinary and completely unique. It's never happened during the Depression, the Great Depression in 1929. And so this fiscal response on the part of the Republican and Democratic Party together is extraordinarily important. In that it is right now that they've passed two bills already. One of them was the bill. Let me get my notes here. The early bill was an $8 billion bill, which just basically expanded sort of the unemployment insurance and a little bit of health insurance, et cetera. It was not very systemic. But then they've now passed a second bill called the Families First Act. And this was for $100 billion. This was HR 6201. And this they were using the existent structures that were in place to try to infuse money into the existing federal system. For example, the nutrition assistance program for children, widows and children and stuff. Then they were sending out paid leave money to the companies, to small businesses. And they were also paying for free testing. But this is government money going to pay the insurance companies, because the insurance companies are the ones that were going to be covering these costs. And so the government was reimbursing the insurance companies. So that you saw that even the second effort that was made was still primarily dominated by the Republican-controlled Senate and executive branch. Now what we have going on, the third major tranche of federal legislation that's coming out, is a proposed $1 trillion program to come out. There is, I guess I don't need these. I'm hooked into my telephone. I'm sorry. So the new $1 trillion bill, the Democrats are struggling mightily to have that money go directly to people, to the workers, into the tiny small businesses, et cetera, not to the large corporations. They're trying to limit the size of the corporations that can get the benefits of this. So this is the irony of this is in the midst of a campaign for the presidential election, the 1/3 of the United States Senate and the entire House of Representatives. And we see the same fundamental ideological dynamics going on between the two political parties, even in their response to this terrible situation that we have here. But something's going to be done. Something's coming out of here that's going to infuse a $1 trillion of value into the culture. And I'm quite confident that a substantial majority of that is going to be coming directly to people instead of the major corporations. So that's an extraordinarily important dynamic that's going on. Now, what I want to do is I want to turn our attention to something here, and that is that this absolutely unique experience that we're all going through right now is just a prequel to what is threatened with global climate change. This type of massive disruption of the health system and of the economic system, this is only a foretaste of what's getting ready to happen with global climate change. And the refusal on the part of the administration to acknowledge that this pandemic was on its way, and the policy of lying about it, of downplaying it and pretending that it wasn't even true, that it was some kind of a hoax, is actually a microcosm of what it is that they're doing with regard to global climate change. They're on the one hand denying that it's even happening. They're accusing the Democratic Party of manufacturing a hoax to try to undermine the industrial base of the United States. And so that we see playing out in microcosm the response of this administration to this pandemic is the exact same response they're having to global climate change, except that now, including trying to cut off the borders to keep people from flooding into the United States, et cetera, that we're witnessing almost a dress rehearsal for what is going to be happening here. For example, the bringing in of the United States military to respond to what it is that's going on now. It's been clear for years that the United States Defense Department has been preparing for what they know is getting ready to happen with global climate change. What we have to do as citizens, participate very actively right now, not only in responding to the short-term, extraordinarily important requirements of dealing with this, such as responsibly staying at home like they're asking, not mingling in crowds, doing the things that we're being asked to do, but we also have to be in communication with our legislators to make certain that the funding that's going to be coming out does not, in fact, exacerbate this problem that we're having with this huge division in the country between the owners of major corporations and the management of major corporations and the regular working people. So that we want to be supportive of moving the funds that are going to be coming in into the hands of the regular people. And you even hear, even McConnell was making, and I know Schumer was actually made a comment on MSNBC the other night that maybe we should consider having everybody go on to Medicare until the end of this crisis. So you get this thing. It's like maybe we ought to listen to Bernie Sanders at least temporarily, and now they're taking into consideration things that Elizabeth Warren has been proposing, and they're realizing that in order to have a responsible safety net for our people and a responsible healthcare system, that the very things that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have been asking for, and that the DNC and the major institutional powers of the Democratic Party have been resisting. They agree with it in principle. They just don't think that the electorate is ready to support it. But now we see that when a crisis hits like this, the huge, overwhelming majority of people in the country say, let's have a coordinated central medical system that can respond to this type of a huge crisis. Let's have a system of bolstering the safety net for people to be able to give people a basic living wage, for example. Elizabeth Warren has said that one of the conditions on sending any money to any companies to support them in this crisis, they have to be willing to pay a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So that you see what you see happening here in the cauldron of this particular crisis, what you see happening is rising to the surface a consensus on the part of the people around the country that the kind of public policies that were being proposed by Bernie Sanders and by Elizabeth Warren are basically being embraced because they understand that this is necessary for our people. Now, I don't think that that's going to necessarily affect the nominating process. I think that because of the primaries that have already been held, that the probability projections are that it's almost a 97% probability at the present state of computations that Joe Biden is likely to win a plurality of the delegates prior to the convention, and Bernie has already agreed that whoever it is that has the plurality of the delegates when it comes time for the convention ought to be the nominee. So what's going on right now among the progressive community, but prior to the hit of this big virus, was an attempt to get the public policies that have been proposed by Bernie and Elizabeth Warren into the platform. And those of us who've been approached to be delegates for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren are all working now to try to help get these substantive planks into the platform, but more importantly, to get them actively embraced and endorsed, not only by Joe Biden, but by the Democratic National Committee. This is an extraordinary opportunity for the historical Democratic Party to be able to rise to the occasion and come to the aid of the people right now, and to bring about this at first temporary shift in the actual finances of our country, in the economic order of our country, which once it gets into place and is here for the next 3 to 6 months, is going to be extraordinarily difficult for the Republican Party to talk the people out of this, to say, look, let's go back to the way it was, where you lived from paycheck to paycheck and you were in total risk. If you had a major medical emergency, that it would bankrupt your whole family. We have to learn from this experience what we need to do, both to correct the previous flaws in our system, economic and political system, but we have to take this as an example for preparing for global climate change. We've got to get structures rolled into place which are going to be capable of responding to the changes in our climate that are going to be taking place. So I think that's one of the silver linings to this very dark cloud that we've encountered here. So I think that these are things that we should be talking about now, and take a look at what some of the conditions are that need to be imposed upon the major bailout that's being proposed right now. Elizabeth Warren has, for example, made a recommendation. There are 8 very specific demands that we as American citizens ought to be communicating to our congressional representatives and our United States senators. Number 1 is that any company that gets any money from this major $1 trillion bailout has to agree to maintain all of their employees on the payroll. They cannot start laying off their people or firing them. And they have to use whatever money they're getting to help pay for their salaries of their people. Number 2, as I mentioned, they have to agree to have a $15 minimum wage as a condition for getting any of these funds. They also have to prohibit the use of this money for purchasing stock back in their own company. And fourthly, very importantly, they cannot use any of this money to pay dividends to their shareholders or any major bonuses to their executives. And number 5, they have to, this is a doozy on the part of Elizabeth Warren, they have to agree as a condition for getting any of these funds to open up at least 1 or more seats on their board of directors for employees who are selected by the employees to participate in the board meetings. And number 6, they have to agree to collective bargaining agreements that they will not, in fact, reduce the pay of these people, of their employees, because of their having received these various bonuses or the money through the program. Number seven, they have to prohibit the use by the companies of any of the money to engage in political activities, such as paying for campaigns or lobbying on behalf of the corporations. And finally, very importantly, they want to impose criminal sanctions to be imposed upon the executives of any corporation that is given this money if these rules are not followed. Now, this is a very forward-leaning and very aggressive set of principles that Elizabeth Warren has been putting forward, and Bernie Sanders is in the process of putting forward additional ones as well. So that what we need to do is, first of all, the people inside the Democratic Party really have to come together. They have to come together. We have to acknowledge that the primary process has effectively raised up Joe Biden to be the likely candidate. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren need to work collectively with all of us to get their principles and their policies communicated effectively to Joe Biden and the Democratic National Committee, to get them to take up these policies and strengthen the Democratic Party so they do not lose the constituents for the Warren and Bernie Sanders movement, the progressive movement in the country. The young people will come out for the general election if they see the Democratic Party moving in this more progressive direction. And yet, we'll still have the benefits of having Joe Biden, who is trusted, and everybody knows that he's a very experienced guy, knows the ropes in Washington, D.C., knows all the people in foreign countries, et cetera, that we need to get the benefits of all of the different sectors in the Democratic Party, all leaning forward now to work together and to take advantage of this situation to get the policies that are necessary for us to bring our country to a more progressive place than was there before the Trump administration came in. And we have to prepare for global climate change. And so I want to, in the time that we have together, talk about this emphasis on how dramatic an example this experiences that we're going through is a foretaste of what it is that's going to be happening to us unless we overcome the same mistakes that are being made here. First, pretending like it's not happening to us, and secondly, allowing the administration to deny that it's even happening, and refusing to prepare for something like this. This is we have to learn from this particular lesson. I mean, we'd be delighted if the Republican Party could actually realize the error of their ways and come over to understanding that they need to prepare for the global climate change, because they've gone through this horrendous experience of not being prepared for this global pandemic. So that if they're willing to come on over. But the fact is, we inside the progressive community and the Democratic community in the country need to gather together and take a firm position on this to learn the lesson that is implied by what's happening here in preparation for global climate change. Now, our office, as you know, at the Romero Institute, we have been engaged for some months now in the process of drafting the Green New Deal. We have a 50-page outline, detailed outline of the requirements for a California-based Green New Deal. We already have a 350-page initial rough draft that is addressing 13 different sectors that are obviously from the electrification of the rendering more sustainable and carbon-free the entire electrical grid system in our state, the transportation system, taking care of the water, the soil conservation. There's a whole dozen very different areas that need to be addressed comprehensively under a Green New Deal. We have all of these in our initial draft bill. What we're doing right now is we're completing this draft. It'll probably be a 450-page omnibus bill. Now, we're perfectly cognizant of the fact that you're not allowed to pass a major omnibus bill like this in the California state legislature. They prohibited that because of all the earmarks that used to get put into all those big bills. But we're working now with the members of the staffs of a lot of the people in both the state assembly and in the state senate, former chiefs of staff, actually, a lot of the former chiefs of staff of governors and people in both houses of the legislature, helping us figure out how to get this bill divided up and passed by the state legislature here in California. And so this is going to be extraordinarily important. If we assume that Joe Biden is coming in, I'm assuming now that it's very likely that he's going to select Kamala Harris as his vice president. I believe he probably is. But of course, I've told you this like 6 months ago, and I thought that that's what was going to be happening. That Joe would probably get the nomination, and that he's going to pick Kamala Harris as his vice president. We all know that she'd make a great attorney general to prosecute Trump after he gets thrown out of office. But she's probably going to be the vice president. He's already committed in the most recent debate before the Arizona and Florida primaries that he is in fact committed to selecting a woman for his vice president. And it could be Amy Klobuchar if he really wants to secure those three northern states. But I believe that it's going to be much more important for him to secure the votes of the people that would be supporting Kamala Harris. So I think that's what's getting ready to happen now. But they're in an extraordinarily open frame of mind right now, in light of the exigency of the circumstances that we face now, to being much more open to considering having everyone go on to a centralized Medicare health program in the country. They're much more devoted to shifting money away from foreign wars and shifting them into domestic preparation for major calamities of this nature, including global climate change. There's no doubt about the agreement in principle on the part of the DNC and Joe Biden, for that matter, supporting a form of a Green New Deal. But Joe Biden is proposing net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That is way too slow. That is way too slow. You know, we have proposed in our draft of the Green New Deal to be getting to zero emissions by 2035. We've got a very rapid program that needs to be put into place to replace the present fossil fuel based energy system in our country into a sustainable energy system, and it's very doable. And we've set forth in the bill exactly how this is going to be paid for, exactly what kind of steps need to be taken, and in the full fleshed out bill, we're putting in very concrete programs. For example, I'll give you some examples that within 90 days of the passage of this bill and it's signed into law by Governor Newsom, we're proposing that every single county in the state needs to take an inventory and submit it to the Department of Agriculture, the State Department of Agriculture, as to what land areas they have that are owned by the county and how they're going to utilize those areas to help bring down global climate change and to bring down carbon. That, for example, when we talked about this with the County Board of Supervisors here, they have adopted a program that the parcels of land that are owned by the county, if they're going to allow any structures to be built on those, they have to be completely electric. There can be no fossil fuels in them at all, and they have to be 100% sustainable. And that's part of the rollout of the regional climate action program that in our office, in addition to drafting the actual contours of the Green New Deal, we have a very active green power project, which is stimulating the rural and urban, both regional climate action programs, so that and we're bringing together a coordination among the different counties to try to have a coordinated set of very forward-leaning programs and practical policies, so that we can coordinate. We were in the process of having a major summit meeting among a lot of the major political officials and their staffs, in the middle of, in early May. We're having to reconfigure that now and are going to be trying to figure out how to do that virtually through internet now. But these two major programs that we're doing, the drafting of the Green New Deal and the working on a regional climate action program in very concrete ways in interacting with the government the government staffs and electeds all through this Central California area, that our office, the Romero Institute, is probably one of the most forward-leaning of all of the different organizations actively participating in the day-to-day work of meeting with elected officials, meeting with their staffs, and interacting between and among the different counties to bring them all into a coordinated program. This is an extraordinarily valuable service that we are providing here, because we have the kind of expertise from drafting the Green New Deal to know what it looks like on a local basis, how it would be implemented on a local basis, so that we have a coordinated state and local and regional campaign put together to confront the challenges, the upcoming challenges of global climate change. And what we want is this not only this statute, the bill that we get passed, or the collection of bills that we get passed as the California Green New Deal, we want to have the concrete programs that have been adopted for regional coordination among different county boards of supervisors in urban city areas and rural areas. We want this to be a template for other states so that we can roll this out up into Oregon, up into Washington State here on the coast, move through the country, move in from the coast, from New York and Massachusetts and Connecticut, that all have these community choice energy statutes passed. A linchpin of this whole operation are the community choice energy companies that we've established here now. Santa Cruz County and in Monterey County and the other counties are all combined now, all having community choice energy companies. So that, as you all know, when you turn on your light switch anywhere in Santa Cruz County now, and the energy that you're getting is completely sustainable. This has been a result of having the community choice energy companies that we have here now. Okay, and this has been extended now down into San Luis Obispo. They've joined our CAA. We've now moved down into Santa Barbara. They're coming on board, and we're moving down into Ventura. This is the largest community choice energy company in the entire world right now. So this is extremely concrete, very detailed kind of work that we're doing here. And of course, in addition to drafting the state level Green New Deal legislation and carrying out these regional climate action programs that we're doing, that we have a third leg of this, of course, and that is our activities up in North and South Dakota. As you know, we were on the front lines of attempting to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline from coming in across the Missouri River. We now are on the front lines of trying to stop the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. We believe that if we can take the measures to stop the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline for a period of 6 months, that we can stop that whole company. That company cannot sustain itself if we can hold them off for another 6 months. And I believe that we can. We're working with the tribal representatives of the Oglala Sioux tribe on the Pine Ridge Reservation. We're working with the Cheyenne River Tribal Council, and we're working with the Standing Rock Tribal Council. And we're going to be reaching out to Rosebud and the other major reservations in the state of South Dakota and North Dakota to coordinate our effort to stop the Keystone XL pipeline. The grandmothers associations are all now mobilizing against the man camps these man camps that the pipeline puts in, they bring in hundreds of out-of-state men who come in and prey upon the Lakota women, and bring drugs in. I mean, hard drugs, crack, and other amphetamines. They bring them into the state and starts distributing them out among the young Lakota women in the area. And then you have this huge number of Lakota women that are going missing and unaccounted for now, that are being taken by these people in these man camps. Now there's a major movement that is underway now. You can see it at our Romero Institute website. You can see the videotape interviews of the grandmothers that are working on this, the murdered and missing Native American women up in that region. I mean, this is a whole collective of blatantly sinful structures. The attempt to push this pipeline with tar sands, the filthiest possible source of fossil fuels in the world, to force this into the pristine lands of the Lakota people, crossing over several of the major tributaries that feed the Missouri River, from which they get 50% of their water, and crossing over the aquifers, the Oglala aquifers that feed the other 50% of the water on the reservations. Here is this filthy tar sands pipeline, being built right through the heart of this territory and across their lands. This is something that has got to stop now. I'm not going to get cosmic about this whole thing and think that in any way this type of a precursor of what global climate change consequences are going to be has befallen us out of some sort of divine action to just try to alert us and wake us up to the scope and scale of the consequences of global climate change. But what we need to do is take the same type of advantage that we would get as if it were, in fact, some sort of divinely inspired wake-up call to tell us how dramatic the impact can be on our health systems and on our economic system if we don't prepare ahead of time for something like this. So that's what I've come here tonight to talk about. I want you to come to our website, the Romero Institute website. It's romeroinstitute.org. To come onto our website, take a look at the work that we're doing in preparing the Green New Deal legislation. Take a look at the full bill, the 350-page bill that we've got. We haven't put that up. We don't want to overwhelm anybody with this yet. Plus, we're in the process of getting experts from all across the country to come and join us to look through the different provisions that we're having here. That, for example, I started to talk to you about this example of requiring that every county in the state within 90 days of the passage of the act put in an invoice to the State Department of Agriculture, letting them know what they're going to be doing with the open lands that they have to bring down carbon. We've got in our proposed bill that if they do not submit such a plan by 90 days, that the State Department of Agriculture is going to impose a program on them to actually assert the control of the state forces to mandate that something be done with those open spaces that is helpful in bringing down carbon and relieving the dangers of global climate change. This is that a lot of us are not used to having access to the instrumentalities of the state to bring about major policy changes. Most of us have been on the outside trying to talk other government leaders into doing things. What we've discovered now, we ourselves, we the people, have to take this into our hands. We have to pick up the tools of the power of the state and move into place and draft this legislation. Say, this is what is necessary. Just like Greta Thunberg said to the leaders, she said, as long as all you're talking about is the kind of changes that can be accepted by the present short-term political leaders that are there right now, rather than what it is that absolutely has to be done to save us from global climate change, my generation will have no hope. Okay, our job is to rise to the occasion. Many of us who are on this call, the 100 of us or so that are here, are members of the baby boom generation. We have an absolute obligation to step forward now to get a second wind all of us. We were in full sail back in the 60s, all during the halcyon days of 1968 and the 70s, opposing the war and opposing, tyranny and foreign wars of imperial power. It's time for us now to have a second wind. We need to gather together. We need to step forward together. We need to lever the power that we have inside the progressive community in the Democratic Party, in the Democratic Party's leverage inside the houses of Congress, in the legislatures all throughout the country, to bring on board the independent voters, to bring on board the people in the Republican Party that are fed up with this kind of ridiculous administration that we've had for this 4-year period. I mean, we have to learn the lessons of this in the same way that we need to learn the lessons of a global pandemic like we're facing right now. We need to learn the lessons of the pandemic that we've had with the Trump administration to see how bad it can get, that we need to understand how bad it can get. And therefore we need to understand what we need to do to lay in structural solutions to these problems that are going to last beyond one term. We had the Obama administration for 2 terms, but we saw that so much of what was done there was just by executive action. And as soon as Trump came in, he immediately started reversing all of those executive actions. We need to have much more deep-seated changes in our structures, in our economic structures, in our health system, in our environmental system, our energy systems. This is an extraordinary time in all of our lives. There's been no time quite like this, except for that time that we all experienced together back in those days when we made all of those promises to each other about what we were going to do before we passed from the political scene. The time has now arrived. The time is upon us. We see what the consequences of our delaying any longer are going to bring about. We have to mobilize right now, and we have to learn the lessons of this pandemic to prepare for global climate change. And we have to roll it back and stop it as fast as can possibly be done scientifically, so that the next generation will have hope, and we will have fulfilled the promises that we've made not only to each other, but to ourselves, each one of us, that what we're going to do before we pass politically from this scene. So that's what we need to do in this extraordinary moment. The time that we're going to be spending at home now, in front of our computers, we need to set up a line of communication among ourselves, coordinate our action together, support the passage of a comprehensive Green New Deal here in California, where we have super majorities in both the state assembly and in the state senate, and set up an example for people across the country. We need to get people to understand that we in California are just like the rest of Americans, only sooner. That's what we've gotten here sooner than the rest of the people in the country. We need to get to a Green New Deal sooner than the rest of the people in the country, to bring them along with us so that they can follow. And we need to lead now. And we have such an important task in front of us right now. We need to use this extraordinary period of time. We're going to have probably as much as 3 months. We're going to have a whole 100 days here. 100 days together at home in front of our internet sets here, to coordinate together to move forward this agenda. And so what I wanted to do tonight here at the first day of spring, in the midst of this pandemic, to reach out to all of you together so that we can coordinate our activities. And so come to us on our Green New Deal project. Come to us at the Romero Institute. Come to us at our Lakota People's Law site. Help us stop the Keystone XL pipeline. Help us stop the global climate change. Help us pass the Green New Deal. Help us develop a regional climate action, a coordinated set of activities throughout all of Central California, and then throughout the entire state, through all the West Coast. This is what we need to do now. That's why I've come together tonight to do that. Come to us on romeroinstitute.org. Come to us on romeroinstitute.org. Help us. We have to be able to sustain ourselves through this period of time. That we're going to be reaching out to our 200,000 people that we have on our communication system across the country, asking them to help sustain us through this period, like other small organizations and businesses all have to do. We have a staff of 15 people here. As you know, the Catholic bishop has actually provided us the entire second floor of the former Catholic high school at the mission in Santa Cruz, at Holy Cross mission. We have the entire second floor for the Romero Institute now. We have a staff of 15 people here. We have 5 people full-time up in the Dakotas, all Lakota people who are deeply embedded in their communities. Chase Iron Eyes and the Madonna Thunderhawk and Phyllis Young and others that are all up there. So that we're doing everything we can on the grassroots level, on the statewide level, on the national level to step forward and confront this threat of global climate change. And so that we have to learn the lessons now in confronting this pandemic of getting the kind of cooperation that we need to move forward. So I wanted to share that with you, and I appreciate you're giving me as much as your time here on Friday night. I know you weren't going anywhere else tonight. So
Danny, thank you so much. You are the people on this call are all leaders in their own way, and so I'm hoping that every single one of us will do what we can. Go to romeroinstitute.org. Right at the right-hand side, there's a there's a little. Whoa, shoot! I just lost it. There's a little thing that says give, and you can go there. You can give a one-time. You can do a sustaining monthly. As I mentioned before the meeting started, I'm fasting 1 day a week on Fridays, which liberates enough money for us to give $1 a day for the next year. People, just do what you can. And those of you that are willing to do more, like to get this out to your list, to get 10 more people, Danny is willing to help and do his part. I mean, I just seen this as the beginning of this. And if we can use this next 100 days and take the 100 people that were here and have us multiply to sustain Romero Institute with whatever else, we all have commitments. Carol and I have we all have commitments that we can't afford to stop with our communities and with our family. But this is absolutely unique and critical for our future. And I think you feel that when you hear Danny speak with his heart and his mind. And if you want to get together a group of people and do a multiplier effect and have a Zoom meeting, and maybe we can do a little, shorter things with Danny too as well to give people all the information they need. But Danny will be here also with updating, because this situation is really fluid. I want to thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, you guys. And I really appreciate it. And we'll be back together again soon.
Great. We
thank you, Danny, and thank you.
Value you.
Unmute everybody. Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you, everybody.
I want them to thank you. Hold on, Danny.
Thank you, Danny. You are awesome.
Okay, kids.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, you guys.
I love
I deeply appreciate it.
You're amazing, Danny. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Danny.
Okay,
Awesome.
Thank you, Romero.
Okay, you guys.
Love you.
I'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Tatanka. Let's add the piano next. Lead us into the beginning and lead us out with a great song next.
That's it.
Thank you. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. I'll sing. We shall overcome. Deep in our hearts. We
Believe that
we shall overcome today, tomorrow, until it gets done. Right.
Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your light.
Thank you for showing up. Donate to Romero.
Yes.